Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I am Shannon Hines, the CEO of Quickcode, and with me today is our presenter, Joe Morales. I can tell that this is a problem that really resonates with a great number of you because we've had a tremendous response to the webinar, so thank you. Before we get started, a few items of housekeeping. First of all, if you have a question, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Please drop them in there. Our engineer, Ross, will be managing those and passing them along to Joe at the end of the webinar. And also, we will be sending out a video link to this presentation later today. So if you have to leave early or if you want just a copy, we'll be sending it out to everyone who registered. So with that, I will introduce Joe. Joe is the CTO of Quickcode. He's been the CTO of Quickcode for about 2 years. He has the distinction of being both a data scientist as well as a computer engineer. He has many years in the field, and I think you'll find him both educational and entertaining. So with that, Joe, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Shannon, and welcome everybody. You're here presumably because you have some interest in HS classification. Either you're an importer or an exporter, custom broker, freight forwarder, trade attorney, compliance professional, whatever. You're interested in HS classification, that's why you're here. And why do you care about HS classification? Because you got to get the right tariff code, because you got to pay the right taxes. You got to stay out of trouble with CBP. And as we all know, HS classification is pretty tricky. For instance, this elephant on the left, he's a live animal, mammal, other. The elephant on the right, not the same. He's a traveling circus and traveling menagerie. But how do you know that? You know that because you're a professional, because you've been trained to do this. And when you go to classify that elephant on the right, you start as a live animal, but you remember that you're supposed to go to the notes, and you check the notes, and it says this chapter covers all live animals except animals of heading 9508. Well, what does that mean? You go there and you find that that's a circus or traveling menagerie, and you're like, wait, is this elephant really a circus? No, but then you go to the chapter 95 notes, and it says that this heading chapter also covers auxiliary equipment, including animals. And you know all this because you're an expert, you've been trained to do it, you've been doing it for a long time. And the reason you're here today is because you want to know, are the robots coming for my job? I can tell you right now, I can give the spoiler, the answer is definitely maybe. Back in late last year, December, ChatGPT came out, took the world by storm. It was in all the newspapers, everybody was talking about it. This is an article from the New York Times about ChatGPT. What is ChatGPT? Well, it was a chatbot, but it was a chatbot that is so realistic, so is able to appear to be a human, that it was phenomenal. And everybody's just really excited about it. If you want to know whether or not AI is going to take your job, let's first talk about, what do we mean by AI? What does it mean? Back in the 80s and the 90s, when we talked about AI, we really talked about expert systems. Expert systems are very predictable. They're understandable because they're trained by experts. What you do is you get a really smart guy like Dr. Einstein there. He writes a bunch of rules about whatever problem it is you're trying to solve. Those rules go in an inference engine, and then a regular user can just query the inference engine and really get the expertise of the expert who trained it. So it is artificial intelligence in the sense that it is the computer that's coming up with the answers, but it was trained by an expert. These things are still around, they're still relevant. I worked on one as recently as 2020. You may remember 2020, that was the start of the COVID pandemic. But long before they developed any COVID tests, I was part of a team that was asked to figure out, hey, how can we tell if somebody has COVID? And we started with an expert system for a couple of reasons. Number one, we didn't have any data to do anything different. All we had was rules. And number two, we were working with doctors, and doctors like expert systems because, well, they're the experts, and expert systems are understandable. And so the doctors were able to come up with rules that we were able to apply to kind of decide, does this patient likely have COVID or not? What about expert systems for HS classification? Well, I've talked to people who have done these before, and these work well in certain circumstances. If you're a specialized importer that, like, say, auto parts or electronics, you work in a defined subset of the schedule, you've got customs classification experts who can write rules for you. You can build a very nice rule engine. I've talked to people who have done it. The guy that I talked to did it. He's like, it worked really great, but it was a big kind of a maintenance chore. The things that were importing changed, the schedule changed. It ultimately fell out of use, but these can work well. But what I am here to tell you is that expert systems are not coming for your job because they still require an expert. Okay. In the aughts and the teens, our concept of AI kind of changed from expert systems to machine learning. Machine learning is less predictable and understandable in expert systems because it really makes up its own rules, but it's trained by this machine iterating over labeled data. Well, what do I mean by labeled data? Here's a great example of labeled data here. Is this a picture of a Chihuahua or a blueberry muffin? Some of them are Chihuahuas, some are blueberry muffins. So a machine iterates over these labeled data, it forms its own rules, and then it's able to take those rules and kind of extend it to things that we haven't seen before. Machine learning for HS classification is being used. It works well. I went to a seminar with a company that developed it, and here's where it works. It works when you have a lot of data to feed it, because that's what it has to be trained on, labeled data. So if you're a large importer exporter who has a lot of historical data, has a lot of different types of data in there, including the HS codes that those things were classified under, what you can train machine learning to do is to find existing commodities that are like the new commodities that you're trying to import. And so you're not really training machine learning to do classification, you're training the machine learning to find what product that you already imported does this product look like, and then that's how it can do classification because you've already done it before. So it's really built on the work of the classification experts that already did it. And so machine learning is not really coming for your job either. Moving on, now we're up to the 20s. When we talk about AI in the 20s, what do we mean? Well, especially recently, what we really mean is generative AI, because it has revolutionized AI. Generative AI is completely unpredictable and inscrutable compared to the other forms that I talked about because it trains itself. It's really phenomenal. It's across all the spectrum. It can create art, it can create music, and what we're interested in is it can create text. So, I went out to ChatGPT, which I already talked about, and said, hey, give me a limerick about generative AI. And here it is. There was a Gen AI so slick, it could mimic and talk without a hic. Its responses so real. And that's the thing. I mean, this thing is really real, as if it were a human. Its flaws hard to feel, yet sometimes the answers were a trick. And that's the real takeaway from this. The answers are a trick. Because one of the things about these generative AIs is they will make things up. In the actual technical term for it is hallucinate. These things will hallucinate. They will make things up and tell them to you very convincingly as if they're real. So you don't have to take it with just a grain of salt, what you get from generative AI. You have to take it with an entire shaker of salt. So let's talk about large language models, because that's what we're interested in. That's the generative AI that we're really interested in. How do you make one? Well, you start with a neural network. What's a neural network? Here's a picture of one. You start with numbers on the left, which are the inputs, and these numbers, are really encoding for all kinds of different things. It could be a picture, could be music. In our case, what we're really talking about is it's text, right? You take text and you encode it into numbers, and then you push it through these knobs. And what are these knobs? Well, these are really called parameters or weights. I call them knobs because you can adjust them, and that's how you train this neural network, is by tweaking these knobs. These knobs are really similar, when you think about tweaking them, to tuning a radio station, right? Which has one knob, the tuning knob. And you start with noise, and you get it kind of close to the station, and you can kind of hear it dialing in. And then you tweak it, you listen, and then you tweak it a little more, and it sounds better. And you listen, you tweak a little more. Oh, you overshot, you come back. That's how these things are trained too. You start with numbers on the left, you push it through these knobs, which is basically math, lots and lots of math, and you get numbers on the right. You look at the numbers on the right. Is that really what you expected? No, if it's not, then you tweak the knobs and you do it again. And you keep doing that and tweaking the knobs until the numbers on the right are exactly what you expected, and then you've got a trained neural network. So that's what you start with. And then what do you add? You add some video cards. All right, so back in '83, this was Donkey Kong. 2023, 40 years later, same video game, very different look. How did we get there? Well, the invention of video cards. In 96 was the first 3D graphics card at 350,000 triangles per second. That's TPS. You can find these numbers in the TPS report. In 2023, we have modern GPUs that have thousands of cores and can do several billions of triangles per second. And how do they do these triangles per second? Math. Everything that's required to render this 2023 picture of Donkey Kong, which is all of the lighting and the shading and the 3D effects and all the surfaces and everything else, it's all math. And coincidentally, it's the same math that's required to generate those neural networks that we talked about on the previous page. So you got the idea of a neural network, and then you feed it these really, really capable hardware things, which were driven by the gaming industry, which is a huge industry. And at some point, some smart data scientists said, hey, I can use these video cards to process my neural networks, and voila, AI was transformed. So started with neural networks, added in some video card hardware, and then you tried it on language. So in 2013 was the first successful neural network language model that was done by Google. Revolutionized the space because it had been tried before, but it was too hard. Language was too hard because there's so much nuances to it. There's so many rules, there's so much meaning, etc. We didn't have enough capability, but once video cards came along, we started using those for neural networks. Google was able to successfully do it. They did it in 2013. In 2017, 4 years later, they invented the transformer architecture, which was another seed change in the industry. That very next year, they released their first transformer-based neural language model, which is called BERT. You can see BERT in the upper left-hand corner of this picture here. It's still around, still in use in lots of places today. Right on the heels of BERT, a company called OpenAI, which at that time was a nonprofit organization, released their first transformer-based language model called GPT-1. You can see it in there too. By the way, this picture, what's represented on this picture is how many knobs, weights, parameters, whatever you want to call them, are in these language models. And you can see BERT and GPT-1, they're just little specks compared to what we have today. The ones that we have today, which is only 5 years later, are enormous. So from 2018 with GPT-1 to 2022 with GPT 3.5, that's only 2 generations. Each of those generations of GPT was 100 times bigger than the previous one. That's what ChatGPT is based on. You can see GPT-3, that generation on the left-hand corner of the picture. That's how big it is, and that's the thing that really took the world by storm. That's the thing that caused the newspaper articles. That's the thing that got everybody's attention until the granddaddy, really, of large language models came out just last month, actually a month and a half ago now. GPT-4, the next generation of GPT. This is the one that not only did it spawn newspaper articles, it spawned an open letter by really important academics and technology people that said, stop, you've gone too far, this is enough, we need to take a break. Do we really need to? I don't know, but that's what happened. That's how much splash this thing made. It is nominally 100 times more powerful, well, more knobs, not necessarily more powerful, but 100 times more knobs than GPT-3. We don't know because OpenAI hasn't told us, but what they have told us is that it's 40% more likely to produce factual responses than ChatGPT, which makes us go, I mean, how many non-factual responses does ChatGPT reproduce that GPT-4 could be 40% better? That makes you scratch your head. But in any case, the picture on the right is kind of fun. This is exam scores from GPT-4, both ChatGPT, which is 3.5 in blue, and GPT-4, which is in green. The one I've circled there is the bar exam. Your next attorney is probably not GPT-4, but what probably is true is that GPT-4 did better on the bar exam than your next attorney because it scored in the 90th percentile, which means it scored better than 90% of the attorneys out there. So that's how you know what I missed on this slide is the idea of let it read the internet. This thing is trained on the entire internet, and so it knows really everything that's on the internet, and it can respond like a human. As I said before, you have to take it with a grain of salt. You know, the old adage of don't believe everything you read on the internet is now kind of like, don't believe everything that a chat bot read on the internet and is convincing you is true in a very convincing manner. So what about large language models for HS classification? Well, I'll give it a try. Let's just ask it, hey, GPT-4, what's the HS classification of a can of chickled soup? It starts with, hey, I'm not a customs expert, and a lot of disclaimer, and then it goes on to say, you might want to start in chapter 16. Well, I'm not a customs expert either, but I'm pretty sure that a can of soup is in chapter 21, specifically 2104, 1060, like there. So what I would recommend you do is the last thing that GPT-4 told me, which is consult a customs broker. But where large language models do work well for classification is take the input that you give it, can of chicken soup, find all the relevant sources and serve them up to you at your fingertips. Use those relevant sources to guide me to what the correct code is. You could argue that that's what it was doing. It was wrong. And let the user or the expert decide what's completely out to lunch in the information that's giving me. So not the picture on the left here, which is a robot taking over your job, but the picture on your right here, a tool that you can use to do HS classification. How do I know that this works well? Because I built one of these things. It's called Quickcode. Here's my shameless Quickcode plug. What does Quickcode do? It provides quick and accurate HS classification to experts. It incorporates state-of-the-art language models, the ones that we just talked about. It's a human-in-the-loop HS classification system, which means it doesn't do the classification for you. It uses those language models and that AI to consult all of the references and serve those references to you at your fingertips and to guide you using those references to the right classification. And most importantly, it'll help you do it in 60 seconds. It helps you walk through kind of the same processes that you already do as an HS classifier, which is look at the schedule, look at the notes, look at the rulings, look at the WCO explanatory notes, synthesize all that information based on the thing that you're trying to classify, and then come up with the right classification. It helps you do that same process that would have taken you tens of minutes, hours before, and get it done in 60 seconds. I hope you'll give us a try. You can sign up for a beta. We're not live yet. We are selling starting next month, but we're in beta. Everybody can use it. Just go to that link, put in that code, which if you're wondering is a cold water shrimp with a shell on. You can register with that code and try out our beta. What's our takeaway? Number one, AI is not going away and is getting drastically better and more ubiquitous every single year or every single month, it seems like. The best AI tools out there let humans do what they're good at, which is understand the nuance of things like HS classifications, and let the AI do what it's good at, which is synthesizing large amounts of data and serving them up to you. And then the last thing is HS classifiers are not going to be replaced by AI, but they are going to be replaced by HS classifiers who use AI. That's it. I think we'll take some questions now. Hopefully there are some.
Yep. So as a reminder, you guys have the little Q&A button. So if you have any questions that occur to you now, feel free to shout out with those. First question, Joe, is how does Quickcode stay up to date with continuous schedule updates and modifications?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Schedule updates are published on the HTS US website. We have a bot that goes out there and scrapes that site every single day looking for schedule updates. When one is published, we automatically ingest it into our system, parse it, train our AI on it, and put it up for the user to use. So when you do classification on Quickcode, you are always using the most recent schedule. And we archive all those past schedules because if you did a classification a year ago using last year's schedule and you want to go back and look at it, you want to look at it in the context of last year's schedule. So we do that too. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Next question, how do you know that Quickcode is working? How do you measure accuracy?
You know, that's a really good question. In some senses, I think that that's kind of the wrong question To me, it's kind of like, what's the accuracy of a circular saw? Well, ultimately, the accuracy of a circular saw depends on who's using it. I know from my experience that a circular saw can allow me to be a lot more accurate than a handsaw can, but ultimately I have to do the measurement. I've got to draw the line. I've got to make sure it's square. Once I've done those things, then the circular saw will let me very, very quickly make a cut and do it so very accurately. But ultimately, it's on me. Quickcode is very much like that. It's a tool. The expert that's using the tool is the person who really has to get the classification. Quickcode just gives you all the resources very, very quickly, lets you do it very, very quickly, and guides you to what it believes is the right answer. But ultimately, the user has to make that decision. The expert has to make that decision.
Quick question. Someone's asking for the site address and the beta code again.
Sure. Yeah. Here it is, right here. hs.quickcode.ai, 0306.35. Yeah. So when you go there, you'll see a little link that says, "Hey, do you have a beta code? Click here to put it in." And also, we'll publish this after the webinar, so you can always go back to it.
This next one, I don't know if this will be more of a question for you, Joe, or maybe for Shannon. Will you write an AI assistant to classify using the commerce control list?
Sorry, I'm happy to answer that. So at the moment, we are focused really on importation. And as soon as we feel like we have done a very good job with that, we've had other people ask us about the commerce control list. It's a really good question. It helps. But at the end of the day, right now, we're really focused on classifying what's coming in to the United States.
Thanks, Shannon. Next question. Joe, I think you might have answered this a little bit during the speech, but does Quickcode generate automatic classifications?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is no, it does not do automatic classifications. What we do is we really let an HS classification expert do the same process they're already doing, only doing it faster. Will sometimes you put in a description and it'll say, "Hey, this is the code I think it is." Absolutely, that happens a lot when something is very, very easy to classify and understandable. A great example is hockey sticks. You put hockey sticks in a Quickcode. There's no nuance there. It goes right to the classification, but it's still the expert is the one who has to say, yes, that's the classification. And Quickcode gives you all of the reasons why hockey sticks seems to be the right classification. It gives you the text of the schedule, which is searchable, the explanatory notes, the WCO notes, the rulings, etc. But the answer, the short answer to that question is no. It is what I would call, say, semi-automated classification. It's a tool that helps an expert make the classification.
Cool. And more questions rolling in. And for anyone who hasn't asked a question yet, again, it's just that little Q&A button at the bottom of your bar. This one might also be for Shannon more than Joe. Does the Court of International Trade recognize AI as reasonable care in terms of classification?
So the answer is unknown, except that we know that the Court of International Trade does expect a human has reviewed the classification. So we're a human in a loop solution that is guided by the experts for a reason. And that is why automatic classification is a challenge. So the answer is you always need to have a human in the loop. We have a human in the loop just for that reason, to make sure all we do is provide all of the information to you in a way that lets you synthesize that faster. So the answer, I think, if I understand it correctly, is that it hasn't really been tested yet because there hasn't been any of these AI systems that have provided automatic classification that way. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm just going to expand on that a little bit. I believe that if if the court came to you or customs came to you and said, "Hey, how'd you get this classification?" and you said, "Well, that's what the AI told me," then that would be wrong. But that's not what Quickcode does, right? That's not what we're proposing here. What we're proposing is you say, "I came at this classification based on this chapter description and these notes and these rulings and these opinions," which is all documented and stored by Quickcode and archived away when you do that classification. So when they come and ask you about that, you can say, "Yeah, here's all the reasons we came to this classification."
right, next question. How can we help the tool to learn on specific HTS? And I wonder if this is poking at like your automobile example from earlier in the presentation.
Yeah, great question. I'll tell you what we don't have right now, but you know, just off the top of my head, a feature is like, hey, I've got all this historical classification information. I can load it up into Quickcode. What we do is, as you use Quickcode and do classifications with it, we use all of that back in our training model. And so as more people use it, it gets better and better and better. The idea of kind of feeding it with your own data so that you can speed up the training, it's a great idea. That's one way to do it. But what we have now is just keep using it, just keep doing classifications, and the more you classify, the better it will get.
And that's the last of the questions so far. Joe, maybe we could put up the slide with the website one last time. And if you guys have any lingering questions, please drop them and we're happy to answer. But otherwise, we might be wrapping up here in the next minute or two.
Okay. Well, if there are any other questions that come up, I hope you'll email us. You can reach out to us on via our website. You can certainly, we'd love for you to try the product, get in for beta. I think Joe mentioned it is absolutely free until June 1st. You can use it for 1 million classifications. We would love your feedback. There are many places within the product to just provide feedback, so we would absolutely love that. We will be commercially available on June 1st. You can see the pricing on the website. If there's any more questions specifically about the AI, we welcome the opportunity to answer those, but certainly about the product in general. And I thank you all for attending.
Thank you, everyone.